See, we earned millions and millions of money, but I must tell you that the Beatles got very little of it, you know.
Who got it then, John?
Well, you know, there's lots of big companies in London with various names. You just have to check them out and their connection with the Beatles, and you see where the money's gone.
The success of the Beatles will probably continue for a long time, but eventually it will taper off. That's not a prediction, that's just the way things go. Now, what do you plan for the future? I realize this is your career right now, but do you have any particular specialization that you care to make, like writing for motion pictures or just continuing to write music, or what exactly?
Do you ever envision a time of just ceasing being the Beatles and going off on your own, or even working together?
We do work on our own anyway now.
You never can be anything else
We
but
are
the
the
Beatles.
Beatles, and that's what we are.
We're also Apple as well, see. They're like Dr. Jekyll and Mrs. Brown. You've heard they're both meant to be nice, you see.
The pop business is a young man's world. It seems to have an ever-increasingly young audience. Do you think that perhaps writing a book like this, and writing at all, perhaps might be an unconscious attempt to win recognition in the adult world? No, because I started all this writing long before I was a pop artist, or even a Beatle, or before I had a guitar. So it's nothing to do with that. The guitars came second. And which comes first? Well, now the guitars come first, because this is still a hobby, which it always has been.
If this turns out the way you want it, will you do other acting roles, you think, John?
Well, I don't know. I can sit back and think, oh, well, I don't need to, you know, I don't know what I'll do. I didn't know I was going to do this, really, till I did it. You know, I don't think too far ahead. Or plan, I mean.
Will all the guys go out and do things on their own now, do you think?
Well, if they feel like, you know, there's something to do.
I think it's time to spread your wings, why not?
Yeah, there's lots to be done, you know.
You got the store going for you all the time, and whatever else you want to do on the side.
Yeah, we'll just try our best at whatever we're doing.
They could be, you know, on our own or together. We're always involved with each other, whatever we're doing.
Could you ever see a time when, in fact, you weren't working together?
I could see us working not together for a period, but we'd always get together for one reason or other. I mean, you need other people for ideas as well, but, you know, and we all get along fine.
And you haven't really decided exactly what...
No, I'll try a few things, you know, but I just found out a bit more about films doing that.
What's this? The songwriting team thing will keep going on whatever happens, will it?
Yeah, we'll probably carry on writing music forever, you know, whatever else we're doing. Because you just can't stop. You know, you find yourself doing it whether you want to or not.
I don't know, you know, I could just get asked this all the time, every day, and I wish I could think of just a straight answer, like, I want to be a man who walks with his left leg in the gutter, but I can't. I wouldn't mind writing songs, I wouldn't mind just singing, you know, to a limited audience. See, my voice might improve when I get older, they do, you know. Or I wouldn't mind just writing books.
A lot of people in America still don't really understand why it all ended. A million and one rumors, conflicting stories. If you had to make one statement as to what busted up the Beatles, what ended it, what would you say?
Because we all had basically had enough, and nobody knew how to say it. I mean, we mightn't even have been aware that we'd had enough ourselves. You know, that's why I say maybe we should have finished it a bit sooner.
But all of a sudden, there just wasn't any further progress. It was the same old over and over again.
Yeah, it just got like a marriage that doesn't work or something.
And then we all started to get more interested in our own music and go in different ways. You know, I mean, if you hear our separate albums, they're similar, but our personalities have sort of developed, and they were a bit stifled in the Beatles, I think. And between us now, we sell 10 times more records than the Beatles did. Yeah. Individually, if you add them all together, we're doing far better than we were then.
I used to think, well, you know, like a lot of people do, well, what can I do if I don't do that? And so from 65 on, I was sort of vaguely looking for somewhere to go, but didn't have the nerve to really step out in the boat by myself, push the boat off. So I sort of hung around. And when I met and fell in love, God, this is different from anything before. This is something other. You know, this is well, I don't know what it is, but this is fine. This is, you know, thank you. You know, it's more than a hit record. It's more than gold. It's more than everything. It's more than. This is something indescribable.
Can you remember when you realized that it was inevitable that you would split up?
I wouldn't. No. No. It's like saying, did you remember falling in love? Not quite. Yeah. No. It just sort of happens. They're always trying to pinpoint what happened, why the Beatles split up, right? Well, the Beatles were splitting up themselves, disintegrating is the word for it. And I think the Klein Eastman situation really pushed it over the hill.
You're not saying that you wouldn't have split, but
no,
for Klein and Eastman.
It's like we were going to get a divorce anyway. It was like the marriage wasn't going too well. Nothing, you can put your finger on, but the marriage was over.
John, did it leave tension in the group? Was it
the
part
tension was already there. When Brian died, we got a bit lost, because we needed a manager. All of us are artists, and we're nothing else, so we can't manage ourselves or, look after ourselves in that way. But it's a lot for four sort of big heads like the Beatles to stay together for such a long time. And in the early days, there was the thing of making it big, or, breaking into America, and we had a goal together. But as soon as we made it. The edges were knocked off. Brian put us in suits and all that, and we made it very, very big, but we sold out, And the music was dead before we even went on the theatre tour of Britain. We were feeling shit already, because we had to reduce an hour or 2 hours playing, which we were glad in one way, to 20 minutes, and go on and repeat the same 20 minutes every night. The Beatles' music died then as musicians. That's why we never improved, As musicians, we killed ourselves then to make it. And that was the end of it. And George and I are more inclined to say that, But when we reached about 28 or 29, it began to be, what's the goal? We've made it. And it was getting like, we were getting more talented, and George began to write lots of songs. You couldn't even make an album, You're lucky to get a track on an album. That's one of the main reasons the Beatles ended, because I can't speak for George, but I pretty damn well know. We got fed up of being sidemen for Paul. After Brian died, that's what began to happen to us, And the camera work was set up to show Paul and not to show anybody else, and that's how I felt about it. And on top of that, the people had cut it as Paul is God and we're just lying around there, And that's what I felt. Paul, I don't know how much of this I want to put out, I tell you. I think Paul had an impression, he has it now like a parent, that we should be thankful for what he did, But he kept, for keeping the Beatles going, but when you look upon it objectively, he kept it going for his own sake, But not for my sake did Paul struggle. But Paul made an attempt to carry on as if Brian hadn't died, by saying, now, boys, we're going to make a record. Paul took over and supposedly led us, But what is leading us when we went round in circles? We broke up then. That was the disintegration.
Do you think you got out of it at a good time, or looking back, do you think maybe you should have gotten out of it earlier, or?
I think if we'd left it any later, it was getting nearly too late, Well, they've been trying to knock us down since we began, including the British press, always saying, the big joke in crowd with us was, what are you going to do when the bubble bursts? And we told them, privately, and then etc., that we'd go when we decided, not when some fickle public decided, because we're not a manufactured group, that we are what we are because we know what we're doing.
John, you don't think it had anything to do with marriage and wives, and that's
no, because I was married from before the Beatles left Liverpool. That never made any difference. I mean, Sin didn't have a career like Yoko does, but married, Patty had a career. That never upset it. I think looking back, understand there'd been four guys very close together, and the women that we were with then, wives or girlfriends, had been, the old-fashioned type of female that we all know and love, the one that was in the kitchen all the time with the baby, and you never, she never came to the sessions even. You never saw the wives, only for openings when they did their hair,
And suddenly we were together all the time, you know, sort of in a corner mumbling and giggling together and doing Two Virgins and Bags, and Paul, George and Ringo think, what the hell are they doing? What's happened to him, you know? And my attention completely went off them. Now, it wasn't deliberate. It was just like I was so involved and intrigued with what we were doing and then we'd look around and see that we weren't being approved. But I understand how they felt, because if it had been Paul or George or Ringo that had fallen in love with somebody, got totally involved suddenly, it wasn't like, you know, George coming in and saying, I'm going to work with Eric Clapton in a band now, and screw you. People still had this idea that the Beatles were some kind of sacred thing that shouldn't step outside of its circle. And it was hard for us to work together then. We think that either people have forgotten or they've grown up by now. And we'll make a second foray into that place where she and I are together, and not some wondrous mystic prince from the rock and roll world dabbling with this strange Oriental woman. If it is Yoko and Linda's fault for breaking up the Beatles, can they have the credit for the great music that each of us have made individually?
It's the same. You can quote Paul, you can look at it in the papers. He said many times that first he hated Yoko and then he got to like her. It's too late for me, you know. And for Yoko, you know, why should she take that kind of shit from those people? You know, they're writing about her looking miserable in Let It Be. You sit through 60 sessions with the most big-headed, uptight people on earth and see what it's fucking like, and be insulted by it just because you love someone. That's and George was insulted her right to her face in Apple office at the beginning, just being straightforward. You know, that game of, well, I'm going to be up front because this is what I've heard, and Dylan and a few people said you've got a lousy name in New York, and you give off bad vibes. That's what George said to her, and we both sat through it, and I didn't hit him, I don't know why. But I was always hoping that they'd come round. I couldn't believe it, you know.
Nobody ever said anything about Paul having a spell over me when I was with him for a long time, or me having a spell over Paul. They didn't think that was abnormal, two guys together, or four guys together. In those days, why didn't anybody ever say, how come those guys don't split up? I mean, what's going on backstage? I mean, what is that, you know, Paul and John business?
Yeah.
Why, you know, how can they be together so long? We spent more time together than John and Yoko in the early days, the four of us sleeping in the same room, practically in the same bed, in the same truck, all right, doing everything together. Nobody said a damn thing about being under the spell. Maybe they said we were under the spell of Brian Epstein or George Martin. There's always somebody has to be doing something to you. Anyway, she didn't split the Beatles because how could one girl split the Beatles, or one woman, you know? The Beatles were drifting apart on their own, you know. But we've been together now longer than the Beatles, you know that?
That's interesting, isn't it?
People always think in terms of John and Yoko just got together and the Beatles split, and we've been together longer than the Beatles. You know, the Beatles were disintegrating slowly after Brian Epstein died. It was a slow death, and it was happening. It's evident in Let It Be. Although Linda and Yoko were evident then, but they weren't when we started it, I don't think. It was evident in India when George and I stayed there and Paul and Ringo left, and it was evident on the White Album, you know. It's just natural. It's not a great disaster. People keep talking about it as if it's the end of the earth. It's only a rock group that split up. It's nothing important. You know, you have all the old records there if you want to reminisce. You have all this great music. I think Paul is selling more records than he ever sold as a Beatle. I'm selling more than I ever sold as a Beatle, as an individual. Between the four of us, we're selling many more records than the Beatles ever did, obviously. It's insane. People, even the young people, refuse to accept change. Yeah.
Did you save your money?
What we could get our hands on, yeah.
What do you mean, what you could get your hands on?
Well, a lot of it got siphoned off before we even got near it, you know. I mean, we didn't know anything about business or anything like that, you know. And there's a lot of money. There's a lot of millionaires around this world, so. Brian just died, and that left us really in the air. We didn't know anything about the business side, not one iota about it. Well, we were in rather a predicament, having been left with contracts signed at me being the next to eldest, Ringo's the oldest, but me being 23 when we signed all those things, and the other two being 21 and 22. And what we got into then is still hanging us up now. That's why the ball game has been so difficult, because everything we signed in those days was signed with, we didn't know what we were signing.
And that's usually where artists slip up, is that somebody waves a few dollars in front of them to sign anything. You know, we've all been through that, I suppose, or the concept of getting so many dollars or whatever.
You see, we earned millions and millions of money, but I must tell you that the Beatles got very little of it. We've all got houses, but it's usually we've managed to pay for them finally now after all these years. Yeah. And that really only happened since Klein came in, the so-called Wolf. And there's millions earned, but we never got it, you know.
Well, who got it then, John?
Well, you know, there's lots of big companies in London with various names. You just have to check them out and their connection with the Beatles, and you see where the money's gone.
Everybody.
And in America, too. Everybody connected with us is millionaires, except for the Beatles.
You're not.
They used to tell Paul and I we are millionaires. We never have been. I might possibly be coming up to it shortly, you know, if we get lucky. But it's true, you know. We didn't get the money.
And you certainly aren't a millionaire. You never have been a millionaire.
No.
Not George, Ringo.
No. George and Ringo are practically penniless. Yoko now has got more money than they had when Klein came in, and that's in 2 years, you know.
Did you feel very bitter about this, John?
Oh, sure, you know.
You must have done.
Well, I mean, for a long time we didn't know, because of course we were living well with those.
You had all the material.
We seemed to have all the material good, but it was like. We got the cake when they got the cash, right? You know, they kept us happy, and just, you know, mainly we were working all the time anyway, so what else do we do? Oh, we lived in a nice hotel, so what? The tour was paying for it, etc., etc. We had a car each, we had a TV and a Rolls Royce, and it was usually on the company or whatever they do that way of doing it.
You know, it's no big news that some artist or some kids in showbiz got robbed, right? It's the same old story. The attitude is, if they have money, they won't work.
Yeah.
That's the old adage in show business. Yeah. If you give the kids money, or the star, or whoever he is, money, he won't work. That's not true. If you give an artist money, he's secure and he can work.